Okay, let me start.
Okay. So.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining in. So we kick off our session today with on bootstrapping the Jamstack with Azure functions. So it's all about Azure functions, all about Azure, and how you can use it for your applications. So we have George here with us today. He's an engineer at Microsoft. Before we head off to him, two things I need to tell you. We are giving out swags, so ensure you tweet, and we will be giving out one of you lots of swags on basis of how long you tweet. At the end of the session, I also have a voucher to give out. So I'll be sending out a feedback form. Kindly fill it, and one of you will walk away with 1 year in learning voucher. Yeah. So right over to you, George. Let me share your desktop. Yep, you're ready to go.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is George, and today we are going to be learning about the Jamstack. That is, the title is essentially Productive Front-End Development with JavaScript, Visual Studio, and Azure. So the whole idea of this talk, I think I should make it full screen. The whole idea of this talk is to just show like what kind of productivity and advancements can you get with the Jamstack. So let's first introduce the tools that we're going to be using. So there's Visual Studio Code, there's Azure, and JavaScript. So I'm hoping that all of you have some bit of familiarity with JavaScript, Visual Studio Code, and Azure. Okay, so we need to have tools that make us efficient and enable us to have some fun. So I think I'm sharing the wrong window. Just 1 second. I need to switch this. And then share the right window. Okay, is that better, producer? I think that's better. Yes, so 1 second. Yeah, yes, slides are not my strong suit. Okay, I think it's good. Yeah, oh, it switched again.
Move the slides to this desktop here and have them there.
Okay.
Let's see.
Is that good?
We can just talk with it that way, right?
Okay, now it's good.
Better now.
Fantastic. Yeah, so tooling. Yeah. So so the biggest problem with JavaScript is that there's so much to do and there's so many moving parts. So for example, if you are building a website, you have to have an API, you have to have a database, you have to do so many things just to get something going if you just want a simple web app. So like, but how can we make all this efficient and have fun and be able to deliver more for our clients and for our friends as well and for our companies that we work for? So let's start. So today I'm going to be doing classic Angular development, but not like Angular JS, but the new Angular framework in VS Code. We're going to talk a bit about serverless functions because that's a critical thing. And then we're going to deploy to the Angular app to a static site. And then we're going to do some automation with Azure Devops. So let's talk about why all this. So Angular, you could replace Angular here with any other framework, React, Vue.js, and the techniques will still stay the same. Serverless functions, why? We don't want to manage servers and we want to be able to scale up and down as we need, and we shall go into that. And then deployment of the Azure functions to a static site. And then finally, automating all this. Why? Because we can't be right-clicking and uploading, and the DevOps world has taken over. You need to be able to reliably and automatically deploy whatever you need, or whatever product you're working on. So the Jamstack. So what is the Jamstack according to the title of our session? It's essentially JavaScript, completely running on the client. So remember the single-page application concepts. That's what we're going to be using. APIs that are reusable and accessible over HTTPS, and then the use of markup. That is usually HTML, but Markdown is becoming quite popular, which has been produced by a static site generator or a build tool. So the idea is that you can use static site generators to do some of this work. The critical thing is that serverless doesn't mean you don't have servers, just that you don't manage the servers and you just think about the servers less. So what are the cons or rather the pros of either serverless or using traditional servers? So with traditional servers, you're in charge of the security, you have to update them, all the things that come with running your own infrastructure, whether it's on the cloud. So long as it's not managed infrastructure, you will have to manage it yourself. Then you have performance. So we need to be as high performance as possible and as high scalability as possible, which is the next item. What do we mean by this? So on Azure Functions, you can scale almost seamlessly. As soon as load reaches a certain point, the app scales up to handle more traffic. This reduces the amount of stress you have as a developer and allows your customers to have a great experience. Then the critical thing is cost. So we need the cheapest possible but most high performing and scalable platform possible. And for us, that is Azure Functions, which are serverless. Yeah, exactly. So how could this look from Angular? So the traditional modern web app looks like that. Web browser, web server, app server, database. As the developer, you have to manage the database, manage the web app server, manage the web server, manage the web browser. But with JAMSTAck, you have a web browser, and then a static hosting. This is where your markup will be hosted, which is usually a CDN. Now, the reason why a CDN is important, that is a content delivery network, such as Azure CDN or Azure, for example, you can use Azure Blob Storage for this, is that it allows your app to be accessible from anywhere on the planet as fast as possible. So you don't, if your server is in Europe, you don't end up relying completely on Europe. Someone in China can access the same app and still get a good experience, and then API. So we are simplifying from this complexity that we have here to this simple web browser, static hosting, and APIs system. So let's look at the architecture. So we have a web browser, and then you have the web browser connects to an Azure Functions proxy, which is a serverless API. So the reverse proxy just hides or sort of translates from the internet to your serverless API. This is to protect it. So here is your serverless API. It receives HTTP request and does whatever logic you want. That serverless API is the one that connects the DB and queries for the data and gets all the information that you need. Now, as I mentioned, for the actual user interface, the HTML component, the Markdown component, that is stored in Azure Storage for as quickest possible delivery with as little work from the developer as possible. So you end up with a layer of 4 things that is simpler than what we used to have before. So that's Jamstack, right? Other advantages is that, for example, on Angular, you have these auto imports. Visual Studio Code is a very good tool, as you will see. As you type, you can update whatever you need and do whatever functionality you need. It's one of the best editors on the planet currently. Then also, it allows you to navigate between HTML and back to your code seamlessly, which is another great advantage of using Visual Studio Code. As you can see in that animation, you can right-click and then go to the actual component. And then the other critical thing that has been added recently is, or has been there for a while, but I've really enjoyed using recently, is debugging. So you can attach a debugger directly from Visual Studio Code, making Visual Studio Code quite a great tool for debugging your code, which we shall go through. So there's this tool from this guy called John Papa. If you work on Angular, you can use it. There's similar tools for other frameworks as well. So let's build the app. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you adding serverless routes using the Azure Functions extension, run your function apps locally, and then automate the deployment on Azure Devops using tasks. So I'm going to minimize the slides now. Just a second. Tooling again. Yeah, so let's escape there. Okay, so and then we come back to Visual Studio Code. I hope it's clear. I think it's clear. Let's zoom in a little.
Maybe zoom in a little. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Looks like the font is not the best. Oh, nothing much we can do about that. So the app we are going to be looking at today is structured like this. You have your main front end UI part in the SRC folder, and we have our function code in the functions folder, right? Then we may have some tests. There's a folder for writing end-to-end tests, and then the classic node modules folder. Yeah. So I'm going to go through each step in terms of the development process. So ideally, you would bootstrap this using a framework like Next.js, Gatsby, and so forth and so forth. But that's not really critical. The critical part is now that connection between the functions and your front-end app. So as usual, you have your node modules folder, your package.json that has your the task that you want to run, start, build production, and the rest. So each and every framework will have its own way of running the app. So in Angular, we use ng-serve. In React, you have React CRA, create React scripts, that has its own way of doing things. So you just have to find how the particular framework you're using works with it. In terms of the code, so we have some data here, right, that we are going to be showing on the UI, and then you have the app here. So let's look at, for example, the list of products, because I think it's always better if you start with showing the app. So the app just shows you a list of products in a page like this, and you can search for them. That's simple. We like to keep it simple during demos. You know, demos tend to go bad, but yeah. So let's come back. So you have your HTML that represents the component for listing the products. You have the service that fetches the products from the backend, and then you have the interface, because we are using TypeScript, that defines what a product is. Again, I will say these are incidental in this case, but yeah, at least you know that they're there. Then you have your functions. So your Azure functions is essentially a single TypeScript function that is triggered by a HTTP request. So essentially, what it's doing is that it's reading from this container with the products and gets all the products and returns them to the front end application for rendering, right? So where does it get the data from? So let's hold on that and we go to Azure, for example, currently. So on Azure, I created a Cosmos DB instance. So you'll ask me what Cosmos DB is. So Cosmos DB is a document SQL. It has a lot of paradigms in it. One of them being document DBs, traditional SQL DBs that allow you to have one system that does all your database requests. So what we did was we uploaded a JSON file that had some products onto the system. So here we are trying to simulate that you're working with a system that has products somewhere, like let's say a shopping system that has products uploaded onto some platform. So we uploaded these products, like the leaf when it was created and its image URL. So we uploaded 5 products, right? They're JSON objects, right? And then once you've uploaded the products, you can type it, you can generate them, it doesn't matter. But ideally, we are trying to simulate that we have a database that has a set of products on the system. Okay, so once you have your backend database, you need to connect it. So the first thing we do is we have to enter the credentials. Please don't look at my master key. I actually hope I had blurred it out, but can zoom in a little so that we hide it. Yeah. So here we have the URL of the Cosmos DB, and then we have the master key. That is the key that is used to access the database, and the database ID. Now, how these concepts map here is that this is the database. It's called product, right? And then there are items inside the product. If we check at the settings, we need to check the settings for the configuration so that you can see how you access it. So Cosmos DB is as simple as having the URL, and you can start calling it and the right library. So that's the URL that you've seen that I have configured on my app. Okay, That's the URL configured, and then the database ID as you saw earlier. So once we have that config, then we have some logic to be able to connect to the DB. So we use a library that comes provided on NPM called Azure Cosmos, right? So import Cosmos client, then you give it the URL and you give it the key and the name of the product, the container. The container is, you see, the hierarchy is product, then products, then you have items inside the product. So you have to respect that hierarchy. So that's what we are trying to recreate here. So once you have that, then in your function code, you just have, you import that code, import containers from shared, and then you do await containers.products.items.read all, and then you get back the results to the UI. So to see how that looks like, I think there's some questions. Let me see if I can answer them right now. Okay, no questions. Okay, thank you. So on the network, if we refresh this, you will see the network call to products. There it is, and returns the product. So if we open this in a new tab, you can see the products match up to what we have on Azure, right? So remember, we have two components on our app. We have the function and we have the front end. So function, front end, remember from our diagram. So all now we need to do is configure our front end to be able to call our backend, quote unquote. So we first we specify how they're going to connect, and that's just there, the URL. This is on localhost. So we execute this ng-serve and it starts, and then when the app starts, as I showed you earlier, the logic to fetch the products is defined. 1 second, let me find it. Is defined. Why am I forgetting? Yeah, sorry, the service. Yes, this is a service that gets the product. It gets the product from the backend service. How does it know the URL of the backend service? From this environment variable here. Remember, this is the local configuration. So you have a production configuration and a local configuration. Yeah. So the product service essentially just uses the product URL to then do a HTTP call to the backend, and then that returns the data that is required. Then that data is rendered. This is the format of the data that is returned, and then that is fed into the product list components, and then it is rendered comfortably. Okay, so 2 components for our app. Let's go back to Azure. Okay, so we've seen that it's possible to fetch data from Azure directly into our system. Now, the next part of our discussion was we need to automate this process, right? So how do we automate this process? So we use Azure Pipelines, and sadly our pipeline is failing. Let's find out why it's failing. Yeah, we will edit this as we are. So on Azure, we use Azure Devops to automate our deployment processes. What I mean by this is that you want to be able to have reliable, reproducible builds all the time. So we need to be able to automatically build our code. So I have other pipelines here, run pipeline, that we can run and see how that looks. Okay. So I'll show you this other one that I had prepared before, as this one's, we see if this one will run comfortably. Let's look at this one. So an Azure DevOps job is a series of tasks that build your app. So for example, in this job, we want to build the Angular app. What is required to build the Angular app? The first step is you check out the code. You tell the framework or the system to automatically check out your code. That is, it git clones your project into the current server directory, build server directory. Then you install Node.js, the version that you want. Then you install application dependencies, that is, you run npm install. Actually, I should have just put this side by side so that you all can see what's happening. So, and then view pipeline. Let's get rid of this.
We've lost George for a minute, so give us a few seconds to get him back. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can post them on the chat. So if you have any questions for George on anything about Azure Functions, anything about what you're talking about, feel free to post it on the chat. Yeah, George is back. George, are you able to hear us?
Hello, sorry about the technical difficulties. We are back. We're back in live. Yeah, back from the studio. Yeah. Yeah. So do I take over? Yes.
Yeah, continue. Go ahead.
So what I was saying was earlier, before that interruption, of we define a task like use Node.js and the version that we want, and then on the corresponding side, you can see the system installs Node.js. We want to do npm install, which is always the first part with any Node.js or front-end application that has JavaScript. We install Node.js, it installs all our packages. The other critical thing is that since you don't want to deploy things that you don't need and copy files that you don't need, you run this build production, right? This essentially just removes any packages that are not needed as well. Sorry, for build production, it optimizes the app. That is, does all the for Angular, you have ahead of time compilation and all that. It does all that work. Then this one removes packages that are not needed, right? And then finally, you need to archive the files. And you need to zip up the files, create a zip of the files that then you will upload to the server. Then you upload the file somewhere that you can read it, right? You upload the file somewhere where it can be now deployed onto the server. And then finally, you finish the job and the work is done. We do this twice because remember, we have two components to our app. We have the Angular app and we have the function app. It's exactly the same, but the only thing is that we change the directory because remember, in our app, we have functions directory and we have the normal node directory, the normal Angular directory. So that's why we are doing that. So you run the build, you remove external packages, you archive, and you copy the file. So that's called an Azure build pipeline, right? Azure as well has, Azure Devops rather, also has a release pipelines. So a release pipeline is essentially now, once we have this code, how do we push it to our server for the world to see it, right? So the first thing that happens is you have to download the package that we did, and then you upload the package to Azure, to the Azure cloud itself, the Azure functions. We upload our code there so that now it can run for the whole world, to see. So yeah, so that's essentially it, and we are done. And this will happen automatically as soon as you commit any code. It will always run the deployment. Every time you commit, it runs. So you can see we have had a couple of deployments just before this this session. So now for the full version of our app running in the world, I need to find the tab for our full version. Okay, it will just be like this. Let me not reveal my UI so that you don't all eat my credits. But yeah, that's it. So you use Azure Devops pipelines to automatically build your code. You use, oh, I didn't show you the debugging experience. So yes, that's the one that was actually the most interesting. So we disconnect here, and then let's say you are a developer and you want to work on your code with ease. So on Azure, on VS Code, we have something called a launch settings.json. This file allows you to be able to debug your code just like you are using Visual Studio, IntelliJ, or anything by setting breakpoints. So there are two things we can do. We can launch the app in Edge, that is launching the front end, or on Chrome, and then we can run our functions. But we want to run both at the same time. We want to run the node functions and we want to run the Angular app. So we create what's called a compound launch configuration. So when we do that, all of a sudden this button shows up. So you can launch the UI in Chrome or attach the node functions, or just run both of them. So we're going to run both of them, but then we're going to do something else. We're going to put a breakpoint on the functions. So this is our function. We're going to put a breakpoint here and here and here, right? So then we come back and we say run. When we click run, it will install whatever it needs. It's starting, right? And then we need the breakpoint to hit. Oh, we have a problem. Refresh again. Yep. We wait. Okay, the demo gods have decided that we are not going to work. Let's stop all that. And we try again. Okay, as we wait and cross our fingers, hoping that the demo works and goes well. We set our breakpoints. Yeah, so here you can see the breakpoints are being hit just like you are using any other IDE. This is the part we're talking about enjoying yourself and having a good experience. And that's it. The app crashed again. Let's not put a breakpoint there. Let's let it complete. But ideally, you can set your breakpoints. You can inspect your variables, as you saw here on the right, and yeah, generally be able to have a full debugging experience of your app. I think either I'm sending too many requests or something. Close other tabs. Yeah, there is your response, and it renders your UI. If we refresh, we again here, and you can see the result here. Yeah, should work correctly. Yeah, so that's the idea. Let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so we've deployed to Azure. You could deploy these manually as well, but I don't advise that. Let's just all learn how to automatically do it using the tooling that we have available. So this is what I was showing you earlier. You have artifacts. Artifacts are your build code that then you deploy into various things on Azure. And yeah, so that's it. Deploy in a web app, build the app, deploy to storage, and deploy the functions, and have fun debugging and deploying front end. Yeah, so refactor, debug, deploy with VS Code, use JAMSTACK for Angular and or any other framework that you have, and then automate with Azure Devops pipelines. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Yeah, end of presentation.
Thank you so much, George. It's been quite interesting.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
I personally, I've never used Azure Functions before, but I know now I can go and try something out.
Okay. Yes.
And,
yes. It's yeah. It allows you to have the cheapest and most scalable app that you can get. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try it out. Also, my Q&A just stopped loading. I'm not sure why. So I'm not sure if we have any questions on the chat section, but maybe you can, if there's no question, maybe you can just give us your parting shot. Considering we have a student audience, what parting words do you have for them?
I'll say yes, we didn't have a lot of time because we had only 40 minutes and I had to compress a lot of the content in there. But yeah, just try these things, try to enjoy them, try to do as much of them as possible, and you will get better and you will enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So kindly do me a small favor. As promised,
yeah.
I promise you guys that we'll be giving out a voucher at the end of this call. So considering I can't access the Q&A, I'll have to share with you, John, the feedback form. Then you can share, what is the session bootstrapping? The feedback form. Then you can share with the audience on So kindly give us feedback about the session, what you liked about it, what you need to be improved in future, and one of you will luckily go away with 1 year learning voucher. So it's random, so it doesn't matter what feedback you give us, good or bad, we are open for all feedback. The selection is quite random. And for the next session, we'll be heading over to creating a Nodejs app in Azure. So for the session, let me also share the link. Thank you so much, George, for being understanding.
Yeah.
So our next session is creating a Node.js app in Azure. So it starts in the next 10 minutes. So be sure to join us there. And the link is... Thank you so much and have a good evening, good day to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.